What's up? It's Way Up with Angela Yee, and how exciting! Monique Rodriguez is here with me today. You know her as the founder of Mielle Organics. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Man, listen, I look at you as a celebrity already. I remember we did a panel together
Yes.
for Art Basel, and I was like, for real, Monique's on the panel? It's just exciting to me.
Likewise.
You know, to see everything that you've accomplished. And now you have a book out, The Glory in Your Story. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Likewise, I feel the same about you. I've been a fan of yours for a minute, so it's always good to see you. I just saw you the other day.
Yeah,
so.
we've been outside.
Yes, we've been outside.
we were at Accelerate Her.
Yes, and it was an amazing conference. I went for one day, and I was just so full just from going that one day. So, yes, it's good to see other like beautiful Black women that are doing amazing things. So we always have to celebrate each other.
So you're on this book tour now. It's interesting because in the book you talk about being an introvert.
Yes.
Which is not something that I would necessarily think of you.
Really? Everybody says that.
So how is it being on this book tour, but also having a book out that details things about your life that the average person wouldn't know?
Yeah, I wanted to share my story because I think that people look at me and they see this like perfect picture and they see the glory. But they don't really understand like the struggle and what I went through, even as a child, coming out of like childhood trauma and overcoming that, dealing with the loss of my son. And I really wanted to use this book as my living testimony to show people that no matter what you go through, no matter what circumstances you face, you can come out on the other side. There is power in your voice. There's power in your story. Even the messy, the broken pieces, God will put it back together and restore you. And there is glory on the other side of that pain. So I wanted to show and share not just the accomplishments, right? Because people see Mielle and they see everything that I post on social media and it's like celebrated. But I wanted to show like there is a real journey behind what you see in the forefront, what you see behind that glory. And people see the glory, but they don't know the story. And I know that this book will not only just inspire, it will inform, educate, motivate, and bring people closer to God.
Well, definitely that, because you were on a journey also. And God is really what you feel like is the foundation of everything that you have going on. And there's times when God even spoke to you and told you what it is that you needed to do. You get those signs. And you talk about that in the book, too. And knowing, because there were a lot of different things you wanted to do. You knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but sometimes it's choosing the right business. And owning a salon was something that you had kind of toyed with. But you're right. That's a lot of personalities to deal with.
Yeah. And because I am an introvert, right? It was a lot. And I thought about it. And I asked myself, like, do I really want to deal with all of that? Like, I really wanted to just be in my zone and create. And even when I started the company, I didn't think that, I would have the level of exposure and be out there talking with people in the community like I've been doing. It came by surprise because I'm like, oh, this is what I have to do because I want people to trust that, the products that I'm creating, I want them to feel the love and the passion. And I feel that if you don't talk about your brand and what you love, nobody's going to know about it. So I had to like stretch myself and push myself out of my comfort zone to do things that, I wasn't necessarily comfortable with in order for people to even know about Mielle.
You know what was important when you told the story about wanting to own a salon, but then pivoting and realizing that products is where it was for you, is having somebody to tell you that is not necessarily hate when somebody's telling you, you know what, I don't know if this might be the right path for you. I don't know if you've considered X, Y, and Z. Because sometimes we do want people to be supportive of us, but you also want people to tell you when they don't think something's a good idea.
Absolutely. Like you don't want yes people around you. Because, what you're referring to, the girl could have easily said, and I won't say her name because you got to read the book to find out, right? But she could have easily said, yeah, go ahead and start a salon and not cared and let me go down this path where she already knew and she's been there before and she knows the industry and how catty, it can be working in a salon, and especially me not coming from that space, having, coming from a nursing background and starting a hair salon. Her point was you may not get the level of respect that you're looking for. And that was a point well taken. And dealing with so many different personalities, point well taken. And I always say to people, you have to consider the source of where you're getting advice from.
Right.
And also ask yourself, what is their experience in the industry? Are they coming from a place of negativity or are they coming from a place of wisdom? And there are people that will come from a place of hate and negativity, but that's where your discernment has to come in as well. Like, you really have to have that relationship with God to ask God, like, okay, what direction do you want me to go in? And God will send those people to also either confirm or redirect the path that you should take. And I felt that in that moment, it wasn't coming from a place of negativity or hate. It was coming from a place of redirection. God sent her. And now I look back in hindsight, I know that God sent her as a way to reroute my thinking, because the salon route wasn't for me. The products were.
You know what I picked up on too in the beginning of the book? You've talked about a lot of the trauma that you had as a child, and you discuss your relationship with your father and the things that you went through with him. I felt like you were very careful, because you love your dad, to also, sometimes it's hard to put things out there about people that we care about in our lives, because you don't know how other people will perceive that. And I felt like you were very cautious in how you approached that. How was that process for you?
Yeah, I tried to be more concise versus cautious, because there was a lot more that I could have shared, right? And the thing about with my dad is he wanted me to share his story. So I didn't feel like I had to hold back a lot of things. I just felt like I couldn't put everything in there because that probably would have been the entire book.
Right.
Right. So, he sat me down. We had a conversation, and he told me that, he wanted me to share his story, because I think with my dad, it kind of shocks him that, I was able to overcome going through what I went through as a child, and being this, celebrity in his eyes, and in his eyes living the American dream. And he's like, I want you to tell my story, because I think that your story and sharing my story will inspire, kids that may be going through, broken homes and broken systems or dysfunctional households, and how you have literally built the American dream. He's like, you should share that, because you're going to inspire people. So I felt really good about sharing his testimony. And also, the thing is, like, my dad, he's not a bad person. So I did not want to make him out to be a bad person, because that's not his spirit. That's not his soul. I know that he suffers with an addiction. It's a sickness, and it's a stronghold that's over him that he has no control over.
Right.
He made a choice a long time ago, and that choice, his life is a result of those choices that he made. And I just wanted people to realize that, we all probably have someone in our family that suffers with addiction, and we have to look at them for who they are, their heart and their soul. And we can try as much as we want to try to get them help, but they have to want to get the help themselves. Right. And it's not any fault of yours. It's not a reflection of who you are, because I used to be embarrassed that my dad was addicted to drugs when I was younger. And I had to realize that those life choices that he made were not a reflection of me. What I do is have the power to break those generational curses and to do something different, to change my family lineage and legacy, and give my family a better life. And now I know what not to do, because I've seen what drugs and alcohol does to break up families, because that's what happened with my family.
Right. And your husband's here, of course.
Yes.
So, hello, Melvin. How you doing today? And you guys got together at a really young age. I kind of feel like you might have been the, after you guys had crossed each other's paths several times, you kind of initiated the actual link up.
Well,
do you look at it that way? Because I know couples argue over, well, no, you were into me first. Well, no, you were.
I think it was, well, number one, I was 12, when we first met. Yeah. So I don't think I was like too aggressive at 12. I think I was just doing what
later in life
12-year-old girls did. Later in life, I think that I think I was just, presenting the opportunity and like letting him know, like, listen, you got something good that's coming across. You better
jump
catch
at
me
it
up, because, you may not find nobody else like me. So, I just presented the opportunity, and then when we did start dating, I was like, okay, we gotta do better here. Like, I have no way to get in contact with you. You gotta step up to the plate. He was late for our first date. So I had to really show him how to treat me. I had to set these standards. And we broke up for a little minute. When we first started dating. So then that's when he had to come back, and he was more the aggressor at that point, because he knew that.
That's a good lesson, though. That with my ex-boyfriend, I remember he was late like early on in the date, and I went out too. You did the same thing.
Yes.
You were like, he's late. Okay, I'm outside with my friends, and I went out with my friends too. And when he called me, I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know what you were doing. I went out. You said this time, and you do have to show people how to treat you, because if you're just there waiting, like, where is he at? You know, after that, he'll never do it again.
He never did.
Right.
He
Period.
never did. So,
you know, you also discussed the rules that you have, because you guys also are work on Mielle together,
yes,
right, as a unit. And so there is also that balance of, people will tell you it can be really difficult to work with your significant other, but it feels like you guys have gotten a pretty good balance and a good structure.
Yeah. No, we have a really great balance. You know, it's not always perfect. And I think as husband and wife, you know, or partners, you're not going to always agree. You're going to have disagreements. Sometimes you may be at each other's throats, and that's quite all right. But you have to focus on, like, what is the overall bigger picture here? And, you know, I really feel Melvin and I are, like, our souls are, like, intertwined. Like, we have, you know, known each other for so long, and we literally think, like, he can complete my sentences and vice versa. And when you are so aligned with someone, like, you can focus on, you know, that what you're doing, the purpose is bigger than both of you. And for us, our purpose is our legacy and what we're passing down from generation to generation, and also the impact that we are doing on our community. And people ask us all the time, like, how do you work so well together? You have to, like, remove any egos. There's no egos involved. You have to have a mutual respect for each other, respect each other's roles and lanes, and complement yourself with someone that has an opposite skill set that you don't have. Right. So whether it's your spouse or any partner that you're looking for in business, you should partner with someone that does something that you don't do.
Right. We can't both do the same thing.
You can't both do the same thing.
Because what is that adding to the business?
No value. And we both offered, you know, two different sets of skills that brought value to the company, with me being the visionary and having the idea to create these products and knowing a lot about hair care and having that science background. Of course, Melvin didn't know anything about hair care. But what he did offer was his logistical engineering background, because he was an engineer by trade. I was a nurse. And complementing those two skill sets together, it created us to be this dynamic duo. And we built this amazing company together because we both offer two different things. And I think this is important with any partnership. I think that, you know, entrepreneurs, a smart entrepreneur knows how to surround themselves with people that are smarter than them in areas that they're not, because it's okay to know that you are not an expert at every single aspect of the business.
It's impossible.
It's impossible.
Right. And he does still have hair, so that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's great for the brand.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you, because I know there were difficult times where people were coming at Mielle, and I've been using Mielle products even before, you know, clearly, like, since way before we've met.
Thank you. Yeah.
And and I saw you being very transparent, and you said, let me address this head on. How hard was that for you mentally? Because I know it can seem like it's okay, but that's like your baby. But that's also trust, right? Because you've built such a rapport with your audience and the consumers, and people love you. But in a second, people can also turn the other way. And I feel like that in a lot of different aspects when it comes to entertainment, any public figure. So talk to me about that time, because I feel like I do feel like we've navigated kind of past that, and that you did address it head on, because transparency, being the face of the brand, it's a good thing, but then it's also like when good things happen, you're the face, and when bad things happen, you're the face.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it was hurtful, right? You know, I think that anyone that says that criticism doesn't hurt or they don't care, you know, they're not being truthful. And I wanted to be very transparent and vulnerable with my community, because the thing is, I understand, like, hair loss is a huge issue, right? You know, I think that, you know, at some point in our lives, we've suffered with both, I'm saying me and you, like, as women, we may suffer with hair loss, hair shedding.
And it's devastating when it happens. I remember I had a bun that was too tight, and I ended up getting like a
You can get alopecia.
Ball. Yeah. And it's still like not fully grown back. And I was like, what's happening right here?
And so that's the thing, like, different styles, you know, everyone's genetic makeup is different. So the thing is, like, I understand, like, the heartbreak of people that's suffering with any type of hair loss, right? But that's the reason why I started the company, because I care. I care about the women that I serve, and I operate with integrity.
And the men.
Dan
uses the rosemary mint drops for his hair. He said it helped him a lot.
Thank you. Your hair looks great, too. Yeah, so, like, I created this brand, you know, to solve a problem. I felt that there was a void in the market of a lack of great products that perform well, a lack of like high quality ingredients. So I've always focused on being mission driven, and the mission of Mielle has never changed and has never wavered and will never waver. So I wanted to address it head on because I know and I can speak to the confidence that the products that we create, the processes, the formulas have not changed. Our processes and procedures have not changed. We still create the great formulas that people have come to love from before P&G came on board, right? And it's because of that is why people have made these accusations that our formulas have changed, but quite frankly, it's just not true. And so I always have led with transparency and integrity, and so that's why I wanted to address it head on. And I think that people also, they forget the fact that I was a nurse, right? I dealt with people's lives every single day. Like, I would never operate with any ill intentions or any ill motive to do something that was going to ruin or damage anyone's hair. I use the products. My family uses the products. Like, this is something I love. This is my passion, and I would never sacrifice that.
I think people have the conception that if a brand, when P&G came in and started working with a brand, people always think that's what happens, right? I feel like that happens with a lot of products. They feel like, okay, well, they're going to scale the product. They're going to mass produce it more. It's going to be in different locations. So for it to be more profitable, because I think people also look at large companies like that as not being like you. They look at it as the man, you know what I'm saying? And so people, I think automatically the assumption is always that something's going to change.
Yeah, and I think that, I took the time to educate my community on, why brands like Mielle scale up and take on, private equity money, why we become acquired, because my goal was to be a global beauty brand, is to be a global beauty brand. And as a Black woman, we already have a lack of resources, lack of finances,
the least amount of resources,
capital,
the least amount of VC money
to grow and scale our businesses. So at the same time, while there is a lack of, we cannot automatically assume or tear down brands that receive the abundance of capital, because when a Monique Rodriguez receives capital from private equity or is acquired, that opens the door so we can have more access to funding, expertise, and mentorship, the things that we lack, right? So we have to embrace it, and we have to take the time to understand when information is being given to us and checking the source of where the information is coming from. So if you have a credible source that's telling you the why, and you're still choosing to misunderstand why companies become acquired or scale up, then I feel that you're being ignorant by choice.
See, I've learned that we should always be building companies as if we want to sell them.
That is the goal.
That's and not even necessarily to sell them, but also just building it that way so that means everything's in order. So if one day you kind of got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So the way you build a brand when you're building it is as if you want it to get acquired, because that means that you're going to be crossing all your T's, dotting all your I's, no matter what it is that you decide to do. And what you decide to do can always change.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Like, you might be like, I want to stay, a small Black-owned business. And then one day you might be like, I'm $2 million in debt, as you were, dealing with this. I need to get some funding because I might lose my house. And that puts you in a different, frame of mind. And people have to also understand that, too, because as entrepreneurs, as a consumer, I feel like sometimes we want to keep things and we have a connection. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but you also have to be supportive of when a brand is saying, okay, I want to grow. And you talk about Rich Dennis, because I know he was helpful with the brand, too. What he went through when I felt like people were tearing him down over Shea Moisture, but then for him to go and acquire Essence and also have a fund that actually helps with Black-owned businesses. Those are things that are very necessary that he probably wouldn't have been able to do if he hadn't gotten with Unilever.
Exactly. And so we should celebrate that as a community. And to your point, we as a community, we should allow the freedom and flexibility for any entrepreneur to do whatever it is that they want to do with their brand. And that is the goal, to either exit or to IPO.
Right.
And you are building your brand. I've always built Mielle with the mentality that this is a multi-million-dollar brand when we were just in our kitchen. Right. And so when you are an entrepreneur and you are trying to make the decision, do I grow? Do I take on capital? the biggest concern for us is how is our community going to react to it? And what we do is we stifle the community when we do that, tear other brands down for being acquired or taking on private equity, because it creates now fear for the strategics and private equity firms that either will devalue us because they're afraid that the community is going to tear us down after the brand takes on capital, or they are afraid to invest at all.
Right.
Now it makes us a bigger risk to take on capital. So we have to just educate the community as much as we can that these are the things, this is a normal trajectory of business. This is how we should celebrate this as a community, because we don't want to keep pushing ourselves behind because we're not creating opportunity for us to grow and scale. And growing and scaling does not mean you have to lose your authenticity.
Right.
And I'm still the leader of this company. I still lead and make the decisions, and you can't disrupt rooms that you're in if you don't have a seat at the table. So I don't look at it as I've sold out my company. I looked at it as I've leveled up and I brought my seat with me to make those decisions.
No, that's interesting, because I just also think what you're saying is true. You said one of the questions they asked you was, well, what about the backlash from the community when you were getting investment, right?
Yeah.
Into the brand. And you were like, do you ask other businesses that? Or is it just because this is a Black-owned brand? Because it will make somebody be like, oh, what if this changes public perception? What if we do this? But that's not a question. And it's kind of when you think about Ryan Coogler doing what he's doing, or certain movies, people will feel like, oh, well, Black movies don't make money if we don't go and see them.
Right.
But then you have to show and prove that, like, yes, this was an amazing investment. Now things that have never been done before have been done. And now that shows you what you need to keep on investing.
Absolutely. Like, we're working hard to open up those pathways. Like, I stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before me, like, Lisa Price, Carol's daughter, Madam C.J. Walker. And we're working so hard to break those barriers and open those doors. And yes, it's hurtful when we're working hard to create opportunity, but yet we're being torn down by the same community that we're working hard to open doors for.
I do feel like you are, and it's interesting because reading the book, you have a chapter. Hold on, I think I wrote it down. Chapter 12, We Can All Win.
Yes.
Ignore the naysayers and haters, but don't become one. And that is, and look, that was in my bio. It's like, I'd rather be hated than a hater.
Yes, that's not because a good position to be in.
It's not a good position. I don't want to ever sit around and like tear down other people or be like, don't support this brand. But you've dealt with a lot of that in the business. Could you ever have foreseen how this business, like we talk about the salon and not opening the salon and knowing that's not, but you've had to deal with a lot, even just having your own brand, on the shelves in stores. And this product, would you ever have thought that other people, other brands would, like you said in the book, tear you down the way that they have, or have issues with you, people you've never met, when it's like, we can't all do this together? Can't we all win together?
Yeah. I mean, no, I wasn't expecting it because, I am a girl's girl. And like I said earlier, I love to see other women winning. So when that wasn't reciprocated, I felt a little isolated. I felt like, well, am I doing something wrong? So I made several attempts to, create that camaraderie with other women that were in my industry, and the love just wasn't there in return. But it only allowed me to add more fuel to my fire, right? And motivated me to just focus on me, have tunnel vision, and just be great at what I'm doing. And I had to realize that, if you are great at what you're doing, it's going to come with hate. If you don't want to be copied or criticized, then don't be great. And that's been my motto. So just having the tunnel vision and focusing on like how I can grow Mielle to be the best at what I can be. And the thing is, like, I am competitive. I'm competitive at sports, I'm competitive with my kids playing games. I think you can have a friendly, competitive nature. You should understand your competitive landscape as a smart entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean that I have to like throw shots or tear you down or have the crabs in the barrel mentality. Like, I never felt that I had to tear another Black woman down in order to win. And I do feel that's why Mielle has been so successful, because I've always congratulated everyone else that has been winning. Like, when you are not in your winning season and you clap for others that are winning, that's how your blessings flow. When you see other people winning and you can't clap for them because it's coming from a place of envy, or you're making up excuses as to why you can't support, then you're just going to stay right where you're at. So to your point earlier, like, it's not a good place to be, like to be in the position of being in the hater seat versus the one that's being hated on.
Right. You can always ignore that.
Yeah, you can.
But I feel like being a hater is such a burden on you. Like, I got to really be so mad. And
yeah, it takes too much energy.
Feeling,
yeah, and the same energy that you're using to hate, like you can take that same energy to create. Like, and I'm sure you're too busy, like building your companies, your brand. Like you don't have time
You're right
to go
about
on
that. I
social
do not
media
have time to
be negative. Yeah.
That is very true. I don't have time to hate.
No.
Now, you talked about your son earlier briefly and that tremendous loss that you had, but you also in the book looked at it from a different perspective, which I thought was interesting. You said, I don't believe God orchestrated my loss, but I do believe he used the stillness that the loss created to speak to my heart.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to have that perspective and also just deal with something, but understand that there's a lesson for you that came with that loss. I can't even picture, even reading that part of the book felt emotional for me. It wasn't even me going, but I was like, I can't even imagine how hard that was for you to have to go through that. The baby was in NICU and the things that women deal with, because we have these conversations all the time, being a Black woman and 3 and 4 times more likely to have issues when it comes to giving birth and all of that. I feel like this is a conversation that's being had more now than ever before. It wasn't something that I felt like was in the forefront, but now we see when it comes to policy, when it comes to people being able to speak out and seeing these numbers and what it is that we can do about it, how we can kind of more advocate for ourselves. But sometimes you were advocating for yourself, but sometimes nobody's listening.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, I was a nurse. I was a labor and delivery nurse.
So you knew.
So I knew, everything that was going on. I knew when his heart rate was dropping. And, of course, I'm in pain, so I can't advocate as much and speak for myself. But I knew that the doctor should have been there, and he didn't get there in time. And unfortunately, it resulted in my son passing away because of that traumatic birth. And, I used my story to also be a voice for other women, to be an advocate for themselves, even if you feel like no one's listening to you, like, ask for another doctor. And, I don't really like to look back and dwell on, okay, well, I could have done this better,
right?
Because the story was already written, right? It was nothing that I can do to control it. I felt like I did everything right, everything that I was supposed to do, and I will not let guilt, overtake me. But I do want women to understand that you have a voice, and you can listen to your body, and you can speak up and advocate for what you feel is not going right at the time. And prayerfully and hopefully you will have the right doctors to do what they're supposed to do, and hopefully making the decision before, you start, your pregnancy process, that you're choosing the right doctors that look like you, that will understand your needs and not just be dismissive, because the doctor that I had was very dismissive of some of my symptoms. And I was a nurse. So I just felt it, the reason to share that was so people can learn from that story and just advocate a little bit differently. But it was very hard. It was heartbreaking. And, I could have gotten mad at God, but God was the only spirit that got me through that painful, dark moment. And God used one of my darkest moments for a purpose in my life, because God knew that he was going to elevate me and that I was not going to forget about him, that I was going to glorify him, because there's always glory on the other side of pain. And sometimes, with pain, you may go through it and you don't like it when you're going through it, but God is pruning you. It's building character. It's increasing your faith. It's increasing your resilience. Like different characteristics that I have now, I probably wouldn't have had if I didn't go through the pain that I went through with the loss of my son. The relationship that I have with God probably wouldn't be what it is today if I didn't go through the loss of my son. So even though my son was here for a very short time, his life was so impactful. His life has impacted myself, my husband, my 2 girls, in more ways than probably anyone could ever imagine. So he served his purpose, and ultimately our purpose is to glorify God. And so with this book, I wanted to write it to not only just inform, educate, and inspire, but to glorify God at the same time, because there is purpose on the other side of the pain. But we just have to unlock that gift and be still and listen to God, because there is a gift inside of that pain. We just have to open it up.
That was beautifully said. I want to ask you, too, because when you were young, what was your relationship with God when you were younger? Because I know that it's gotten so much stronger. Your faith has gotten so much stronger. Going to church is something that has pretty much saved you, I would say, as it should. What was your relationship like as a younger person, though?
Yeah, so I know there was a God, right? But I think I grew up a little confused because we would go to church on just like Easter,
right?
Nothing else. And then my mom put me in Catholic school one year. And so their teachings and belief system is similar, but still a little bit different. So I kind of grew up a little confused of like, my faith, right? And my mom, she wasn't big on church. Not saying that she's not a believer. She believes in God. But
everybody doesn't feel like they have to go to church.
Doesn't feel like they have to go to church. And so there was no like community of other believers that helped develop me spiritually, helped develop my prayer life. I didn't have any mentors that, helped show me how to increase my faith and God show me how to pray, right? Because prayer can also be intimidating. Like you feel like you're just sitting there talking to yourself and is anyone listening? But I had to learn like God is always here with us. He's never far away, and God is always just waiting for us to come to him. He's an inviting God. He's not a loud God. He's not a forceful God. He's just standing there and saying like in the spirit, I'm opening up my arms, and when you're ready, I'm going to be here for you. And I felt like that has been my journey for God, like with God. Like he's always been there. He's never left my side. And I share lots of stories in the book where it's like the only way I was able to get through that situation, like God had his hand on me when I was little and, experiencing life with my dad and the places that he had me. And it was only God that saved me from things happening that could have been worse. Right. So I know that God has always had his hand on me, but he was just waiting for me to just take myself out of the equation and just start having that relationship with him. And the only way that we can have a relationship with God is by being in his house, being in his kingdom, knowing his word, and having a conversation with him. And I learned that going through that loss because my husband and I, we started going to church, and we got saved once we started going to church. And that's when our lives like totally shifted. So I can testify to how God has glorified us and has lifted us up, have brought us through like something so devastating and so painful. And I know how life was before my relationship with God. And I can say I like life a lot better on the other side of having my relationship with God versus trying to figure out things the Monique way, because things were not going the way that I wanted it to go because I was trying to assist God and I was trying to manipulate situations to get the outcome that I wanted. But God doesn't need our help. He doesn't need our assistance. He's just waiting for us to step aside, surrender, and submit.
Oof. Well, I want to ask you this because I don't believe this was in the book. How did Melvin propose to you?
Oh, how did he propose? Yeah, he proposed. I don't even know if they have, these places here at the Sybaris.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the Sybaris?
It's like a. I don't even know if they're still open now, but it's like a hotel, and they sold it as like a nice resort type of, hotel that was more special than a Motel 6 or 8, but it really wasn't. But at that time, I thought it was really nice. Yeah. But looking back, I don't even know if they're still open.
I think they call that a romping shop, isn't it?
That was a good question.
So did you know that was going to happen when?
I kind of felt it in my spirit. He didn't come out the blue. We had been talking about marriage and having kids long before we started having kids. And he says this all the time, and I hope he's telling me the truth. I hope he's not lying. He's like, I always knew that you were going to be my wife. So
since you were 12, you knew.
Maybe not 12, but maybe since 16. But yeah, I think that like he knew and I felt it that he was gonna propose.
You think you knew too?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
Since like you always knew that was gonna be your person.
I did.
Even when he was messing up, he didn't have a cell phone. And
because he used to piss me off.
Now, I want to know about some of the rules that you guys have. One of them in the book that you talk about is that you guys cannot get phone numbers from people of the opposite sex, right? Like even if somebody will approach you, it's business, and it's like, here is the assistant's email.
Yeah.
What are other rules that you have when it comes to like intertwining those two things, like some boundaries that you have set up?
Yeah, some boundaries that we have set up is like, obviously when we're out, we meet a lot of people from the opposite sex, and, exchanging phone numbers is, it's not necessarily because of like, jealousy or insecurity. It's more of a respect issue because, sometimes people can take your friendliness or being extroverted as if they're a broken individual. They can take that as being flirtatious, and for both of us, right? Because I make sure that when I'm interacting with people, I'm always very nice and cordial, but I never want to give off, any other type of vibes, right? We want to draw the line and say, okay, if you want to go to the next step, if you want to connect with us, here's our assistance.
Right, because you also can't control how people will convey that interaction. Somebody be like, yeah, her husband be da-da-da-da-da.
He gave me his number, or I gave him my number. So, we have to be very like, strict with that. And then also we travel a lot, and we travel with the opposite sex. So, and I put this in the book, like we are always on FaceTime pretty much the whole night until it's time to go to sleep. So we know like each other and we trust each other, but we have to be careful with other people out in this world because there are a lot of broken people that don't like to see a happy married couple and will try to, do whatever to like break up a happy home. And so knowing that we have to just have like really great discernment and knowing how to read people and being careful with how we interact with people so it's not misconstrued or taken the wrong way. But that's a big one for us.
And what about business and pleasure for you guys? How do you turn it off? Like if you're trying to be on vacation, but things are happening, is there any rules as far as like, can we not talk about business for X, Y, and Z? How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's hard because especially in the beginning, like building Mielle was something that brought us so much joy and we had so much fun doing it. So when we would have conversations about Mielle, it didn't feel like it was inappropriate because, this was something that we loved talking about. And then we had a conversation with our pastor. And, Melvin, he would bring the laptop in the bedroom and we would like, look at the back end of the website and he'll talk about sales in the bedroom, like where, that's
right. You're like, we're trying to have some us time.
And our pastor told us like your bedroom is a place of, it's sacred and you don't want to bring work into that bedroom. Your bedroom is for X, Y, and Z. And that's exactly what it should be for. So don't bring in, your work, keep your work separated at the office and keep home that sacred place where you can unwind and relax and talk about other things outside of work. And since he told us that, we've taken that advice and it's been a lot better and easier for us to navigate not bringing work home. And sometimes it still slips through the crack. You have to give each other grace.
Right.
But setting those rules. And since we have had that conversation with our pastor, Melvin has not brought a laptop into our bedroom. So
he's like,
and I don't even have a laptop anymore. Well, he'll use his phone. But, I try to not let my phone or laptop control me because, it can interfere. And sometimes even with my kids, your kids will be talking to you and you're on the phone. I have to check myself like, oh, let me be present in this moment. So we try to practice, at least I try to practice it a lot more maybe, is just being present in the moment.
Now the book is out. How do you feel?
I feel very freeing. Like it feels very like cathartic to just like put my story out there and to be vulnerable and to share stories and insights that I've never shared publicly.
Okay, number one on
Amazon.
Oh, that's a big deal. All right, yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We got to celebrate that.
Amen right now.
Oh, my gosh. Let me drink some tea to that.
Yes.
Cheers. That's amazing.
Cheers. Yep.
Number one on Amazon.
Just while y'all talking, so I don't know if it's Angela. What's happening?
I like to think I'm a sign for you, too. But when it comes to you being on tour, how has that been with people receiving this story, talking to you about it? What has stood out to you?
Oh, man. Like, what has stood out the most? Well, two things. One lady, she drove 6 hours to just get her book signed because she's been a longtime fan. And, you know, that was just like, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, that's impact. We had another lady that drove 4 hours, and she ended up missing the entire segment of me speaking. She got there just in time for me to sign her book. And she was just like, you know, I know I missed it, but I just wanted to just see you in the presence. I just wanted to get your signature. And that's impact. And for me, it's not just about success of the book. It's really about significance. Mm-hmm. So if I am impacting someone's life by sharing my story and inspiring them to dream bigger and lighting a fire inside of them to say, you know what, it's not too late. Because I've read Monique's story, and she started this company when she was 30 years old. She was married with kids. Like, you know, she went through a loss. She went through heartbreak. Like, there is nothing that I can't accomplish. There is nothing that's too hard for me. And seeing my story and seeing how I dealt with grief, and I say this, the company is successful, but that didn't save me. God saved me. I had to deal with my grief. I had to process it. Because in order for me to lead effectively, in order for me to be whole, I had to deal with issues. I had to deal with grief. I had to deal with childhood trauma. And it's a healing journey. And we're all a work in progress. And This is a lifelong journey. And I just want to impact people with my words, with my story, to just motivate them to be great at whatever it is that they do. Like, it's never too late.
And listen, you guys, make sure you get the glory in your story. See, that completely sums up the title of the book. But there's so many lessons here. I mean, this is like a soap opera, too. There's scammers. There's people everything is in this book. You know, there's love. There's God, which we all need in our lives. And I think this will really solidify that for anybody who might feel lost. Maybe it is time to go back to church. Maybe it is you really tapping in and listening to what God is telling you and what direction it is that you're supposed to be going in and paying attention to those signs. And asking for those signs too, by the way. But congratulations to you. I'm glad you were able to come up here. I'm glad the book is out and I had a chance to read it.
Thank you. Thank you for reading it.
Oh, listen, you already know. Because I also want to say, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of great information in here. And I always tell you this, you know, for me being an entrepreneur myself and reading like certain tips that you have. And look, you've gotten tips from your CFO that's in this book, just different people that have been around you, lessons that you've learned. And you're definitely passing those on in a time like this. For me being a Black woman trying to get my brand off the ground, too. Yeah. It's a different type of brand. I have a coffee company, but it's also just so many things that I can take valuable lessons from reading this book too.
Of course you can, because you're still building a brand.
Yes, I am.
Yes, and congratulations.
I'm going to be patient with myself.
Yes, and give yourself grace.
I will, but not too much. We got to go. Okay. But thank you so much. I appreciate it, and congratulations.
Thank you again. Thank you for having me.
Way up.